Welcome back to Recycled and Saved. I really wanted to talk today about the Honda 400EX. You can see we've taken a bunch of them apart here. Let me just show some of the ones we've taken down and talk a little bit about the 400EX. If you're looking to buy a sport quad and you want it to do all things, trail ride with your buddies, maybe race to the next tavern, actually go out on a track once in a while, but yet still get out to your deer stand, or maybe even put a little hitch on to pull a very small boat to a spot you can't get to with the truck. There's only one quad that's the best quad for jack of all trades, master of none, without question. Honda 400EX. It's the longest running quad built. It's the most volume quad in the same configuration out there, and the thing is pretty much bulletproof. You think back in the 80s, we had three-wheelers. In the early 90s, the two-stroke quad racers and Yamaha Banshees and stuff showed up, and they were fun on the track, but they rattled apart and they were something else. And then nothing really happened. And then in 1998, Honda came out with the 99 400EX, TRX 400EX. That's this machine. And it was the same from 98 all the way up to 2004. All the parts are interchangeable. You can't tell what model year it is without looking at the VIN or the engine number. And it's a bulletproof solid unit. They started by using the 96 Honda XR400 engine. So the engine, the gearbox, the valve train, the starter, it's all bulletproof. And Honda did a great job with the rear suspension, the rear hubs, and the front suspension. Excuse me, a lot of these ATVs, the first gens, the ball joints and the swing pivots and that, it all falls apart. These things are rock solid, as they say on the GMC truck commercials. These are really military grade. They really do hold up well. And again, we've had a lot of them and taken them apart. The one you're seeing in this video right here is the 2005 and newer. 2005, they added reverse, and they changed the bolt-on and the styling of the plastics, so the frame brackets and that for different. So if you're going to get a Honda 400EX, and if you're looking at used parts on eBay or talking to a parts guy about new parts, 2004 and older, 2005 and newer, everything should bolt up cleanly. Most of the engine components, valve train, transmission, and all that stuff, the same regardless, except for obviously the reverse attachment in 2005 and on, which I think is a pain in the neck, a reliability issue, and shouldn't even be there. If you can't get off this thing and pull it backwards, you shouldn't have it. It's basically a response. When Honda built this thing by taking a motorcycle platform and building a solid four-stroke ATV around it, they sold them as fast as they could build them. Suzuki did the same thing in 2003. They came out with the LTZ 400, which is based on the DRZ 400, which is the most reliable dual sport liquid cooled motorcycle ever built. And they built it also in a Kawasaki version, and they also put a reverse on it, and that's how Honda felt the need to respond in 2005. Mistake in my mind, but that's what they did. The real reason I like the Honda better than the Suzuki LTZ Kawasaki is because it's oil cooled like a Harley Davidson motorcycle. No radiators to have rock chips and stuff get damaged. For whatever reason, DRZ 400 bikes are bulletproof. I've rarely had coolant issues or radiator issues with them, and we've had a lot of those through here too. But with the liquid cooled four-wheelers, for whatever reason, I don't know if they throw up more rocks and if they're parked outside more often, weather checking, the liquid cooled ones always seem to have water pump problems and leak problems and damaged radiators. So I'd really say the Honda's the way to go. My personal preference based on my experience. Get what you want, they're all good, be happy with them. The other thing to keep in mind is that after about 2008 and on, there was a lot more of these sport quad racer quads. I apologize, it was actually 2003, I think, is when 2004 Yamaha came out with the YFZ, and then Honda followed with the 450 CRF. They basically took more of a motocross bike platform. They're taller. If you're going to go on a track and try to compete for a trophy, yeah, go get a 450 liquid. But if you're going to be going down the trail or just comfort riding, that taller quad suspension is going to be more likely to have you tip over and crash, and it's also going to be more of a reliability hassle and problem and an issue with them. I would say that if you're going to be doing all around stuff and you're only going to have one quad and you're not doing, farm work with it, this is the quad right here, this 400EX. Get some brush guard boot holders like that so your feet don't fall off. And other than that, go ride it. Maybe get some taller handlebars like this one has if you're taller and you want that setting. But other than putting the foot nets on and maybe a rear rack of some kind and the handlebar settings, there's really not a lot that you need to do with this thing from a mod setup standpoint. If the seat's tore, get a good seat cover on it so you don't wreck the pad. But there's really not a ton to do with it when you get one used. Again, change the oil. I tell people this about bikes all the time too. Change oil a lot until it comes through good, clean, and clear. You don't want dark oil. A lot of expensive oil changes are going to save you a ton of money on valve train issues. Make sure you got good, clean oil, good filters, synthetic oil because it runs in the gearbox here and that's going to break the viscosity down on you. Make sure you got a good quality foam oil filter. Get a couple extras so you always have a clean one to put in and you can clean them out in the parts washer later. If you keep the air filter clean on this and you keep the oil clean, I don't think you're ever going to have any problems and this thing's going to run mechanically forever. When you look at what else you need to worry about on these, this unit here, number 52, I rode the wheels off of. This was my favorite one. Somebody had it set up for wider stance for off-road oval track racing, but I rode it out in the trails and it was just incredibly great for me. But if you've got one of these, make sure that you get the front suspension components tight and lubed so they don't come apart on you. Make sure that you get the oil filter, air filter taken care of like I said, and make sure that on the rear suspension, if you can't get that swing arm bolt loose, check it. Make sure you can unbolt it, loosen it up, then spray it with some really good like Creole or something, lube to get it opened up because otherwise you might never be able to get that bolt out of the cases. These things are wet and dry and mud and clean so often. You need to be able to get that swing arm bolt out someday to put new swing arm bushings in. And then also in the rear hub, you also have the rear axle bearings, and you need to make sure that none of that stuff comes loose. And if and when it does, you need to be able to get the bolts apart to get new bearings in there and on it. So you might want to take that rear axle and get the lock nuts loose on it with a pipe wrench, lube them up good. And again, you might have to get that like a good Creole brand penetrating oil or something to get it opened up and loose. The other thing to do is make sure you got decent brake pads so you got decent control. And I always put green goop in all ATV tires. Never want to run a tube. Every time I've tried to mess with tubes, I end up tearing off the valve stems on the rims out in the middle of nowhere. But if you've got green goop, the PSI level in these is so low that you should be good to go. If you've got decent tread on the front tires to make sure you got good braking and good steering control, the rear tires, I don't care if there's hardly any tread on them at all unless you're doing snow riding in the winter. But if you're thinking about getting an ATV, this one right here is it. This one right here, in fact, like I said, this was my unit for a couple of years until we parted it out and got a different one. This one also had those bags over the top of the front shocks. For whatever reason, ATVs, when you got group rides, everything gets chipped up and banged up, and you don't want your shocks beat up. So sorry I didn't mention that. But any comments to anybody else seeing this video, put them down below on what to watch for in a 400EX. The rear suspension is going to give you the most trouble and cost. And the valve train, if you need to get the valves reset. If the thing's backfiring, or if it only starts cold, you probably need to get your valves shimmed or checked out on the head. That's the most expensive thing you're ever going to have done on this deal. Other than that, ride it, run it, smile, have fun with it. If somebody wants to brag to you about their 450 YFZ liquid machine and how great it is, great. Tell them to go buy a motocross dirt bike if that's what they're after. If you're going to ride a four-wheeler, you want to have fun, you want to be able to go down the trail, this is the unit. And as always, I've said it before and I'll say it again, I would much rather ride an ATV in the woods on a trail with a bunch of buddies than UTVs. UTVs is like one guy playing a video game and everybody else on the couch watching them. Here, everybody gets to steer, everybody gets to ride. Didn't really talk about the fact that this is a clutch gear shift unit. It's not a snowmobile clutch setup like the Polaris and the newer systems are. Frankly, that was great for me over the years, because if somebody wanted to come along and borrow my wife's or one of the kids, if you don't know how to shift and clutch, you can't come along. And if you do know how to shift and clutch, you're probably going to be good and okay on the trail. So if you're going to have multiple machines like up at a cottage or out at the lake, and you want to know who you're going to let come along, make sure they got a clutch and a transmission, and that's an automatic way to weed out people that don't belong on them. Again, 400EX, machine to get. They built them from 1998 till about 2010. So they claim to have built them through 2016, but in reality, I think that they were selling the 2013s that they had trickled out in inventory. Newer ones have that reverse issue. If you can find a 98 to 2004 in excellent clean condition, or get it in excellent clean condition, that in my mind is the ultimate sport quad. Go get it. Thanks for watching. Hope this helped. Put comments below that might help others. Subscribe.